Welcome to Creator Conversations. This is a series dedicated to encouraging up-and-coming digital entrepreneurs with the stories of business owners who have started their businesses online. Today, I am joined by R'Chelle Lynn. She is she works helping cannabipreneurs pivot into the digital space while normalizing and decriminalizing conversations around cannabis. She has worked as a digital marketer and content creator, and she is joining me today. R'Chelle, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm happy. It's a new day, so yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, so it's right now it's 8 a.m. in Texas where I am, but where you are, it's closer to 6 a.m. So I do you have coffee or something? How do you get yourself going this early?
You know what? I have a lot of East Coast clients still, and when we're like in project mode, which has been a lot lately, I'm working East Coast time. So I guess in a way, I'm kind of used to it a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, if you already have to get up early quite a bit. I like to get up early most of the time. I've got a large family, and so if I want to get like exercise or run in or something like that, I have to get ahead of all of them before they all wake up. So, um, all right. So will you tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are and what your business is today?
Yeah, so I'm R'Chelle Lynn, and I work in the cannabis space. I am a cannabis content strategist, and normally when I say that, it just confuses the heck out of people. But to make it simple, I work with businesses in the ancillary and licensed side of the cannabis industry, and I help them cultivate their messaging and create content strategies so that they can share their brand, their message, their purpose, and their mission with the world, and also do the work to, like, as you mentioned, remove that stigma that comes when we have conversations about cannabis. So I help them really figure out how to maneuver in the digital space, which is not easy when you put cannabis or CBD in front of it. And we just come up with those solutions to make cannabis more mainstream and acceptable.
Yeah, yeah, and I totally get that. It it would be somewhat delicate. It's hard enough in just about any business, um, coming up with the kind of language that really does a great job of conveying what you're about and helping people have a clear understanding of what you do. But then when you add the complexity of, something that maybe already comes with some baggage,
Mhm.
it's a little bit more difficult. So I know you've worked for a long time doing content strategy and consulting. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you did before you started focusing on your business as it is today?
Sure. I always tell people I feel like I've lived nine lives. So initially, when I came out of undergrad, I went to University of Maryland, College Park. I just knew that I was going to be a journalist. It didn't work out that way. I found myself in education, and I was an English teacher for a few years, and I really loved that experience. Of course, if I'm a content creator and copywriter, I love words. I love language. So I really enjoyed that. I saw the need for improved educational policy. I understood working in an inner city school what was happening. And I also was 23 when I went into the classroom, and I was drained after 2 years. And so I went from there to writing educational policy for accreditation agencies. And then after, I think maybe in 2008, I was like, oh, I'm just going to do my own thing and start my own business. And this is kind of when all of the digital and online businesses were coming to the forefront even more,
Hmm.
more individual digital entrepreneurs. And I just kind of I figured out a portion of this social media thing and was able to market myself as a copywriter and content creator, and just started working for other bloggers and other content creators, and it kind of just grew from there initially. So that was all before the cannabis side came into play. And then cannabis happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And I looked back at some of your previous catalog, and you were creating tons of content around helping people write better copy, um, even getting into more like mindset and positivity stuff for entrepreneurs, overcoming self-doubt and imposter syndrome, like stuff like that. So
Mhm.
you were you were really positioning yourself um, in that space. And then tell us a little bit about the kind of the catalyst and the shift to focusing on cannabis.
Yeah, I will say that I became aware that I wanted to be involved in the cannabis space in some type of way in 2014. And that's before even medical was legal in the state of California. It was something very, very new. At that time, all that I knew was to be involved, I would either have to get a license and get a dispensary or be a cultivator and grow. And that's just I didn't see a way to $1 million at that time to getting a license for a dispensary and all of the different hoops that you have to go through. And at that time, I was very closeted. I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want my family to know that I consumed. I didn't want the public to know that I consumed. I remember honestly having a client and she posted that she was smoking, and I was like, hey, you need to take that down.
Oh yeah.
So I was very much closeted about it. And fast forward to 2015, 2016, my uncle was like my second dad, very, very close. He sat down and watched the football game and had the equivalent of an aneurysm to his spine. And so he never was able to walk again after that. And that just
Hmm.
caused a whole series of medical conditions that I just had no idea existed. It flipped as a family, it flipped our lives upside down, and it really made an impact. And so I kind of, at that time, life kind of just, everything was put on hold. Um, but cannabis was still in there in the background, and it came back to the forefront when he just continued to get more and more ill. And his pain, when they were asking him about his pain was like on a 13 out of a scale of 1 to 10. Um,
Yeah.
and I recall having conversations with physicians and nurses about the use of medical marijuana. And at the time where we were, it was a no-go. Plus he was a veteran. So there was no movement. Eventually we're able to get him. We worked as a family to figure out a schedule for flour and oils, and get him kind of on a routine using cannabis. And the quality of his life just improved. The pain was lessened. He was able to have an appetite again. And almost instantly saw the differences. And that's when I knew again that I couldn't just allow the power of this plant to just be a back burner conversation in my life. Um, and it still took I'll say another year and a half after that to figure out how I was going to do it. I was intentional since I was already in the entrepreneurial space. I made sure that every conference that I went to at that time, you would start to see little panels or little sessions related to cannabis. And sometimes I would buy the entire conference just to go to those panels
Yeah.
in cannabis. And I was really strategic. I was strategic about meeting the power players who were some of the first people to get licensed and open dispensaries and start businesses in the space. And I would go and I would sit in the front row. I had my list of strategic questions and I would ask and I would get introduced. And that's kind of, I just kind of maneuvered my way in like that. Yeah.
Awesome. So, and thank you so much for sharing that very personal part of your story.
Mhm.
And I can imagine um, that was a really difficult time, and I see how powerful that circumstance would have been toward pushing you in this direction. What are what are some other things that continue to inspire you and motivate you to pursue this as your business?
Um, just I think the education of it, I think really dispelling the stigma. I've seen it I've seen it work for so many people that I know personally. And of course, reading other stories of people that it's impacted. I really am excited to change the narrative. For me, I think it's about changing the narrative when it comes to what is a stoner. Like if you were to look at me or if you were to look at my body of work, if I didn't have on this shirt that just screamed cannabis, you might not ever assume that I was a smoker, because there's just a lot of biases when it comes to cannabis. And so, a lot of times some people are surprised when I say, hey, I wake and bake. Like I wake and bake almost every day. I have a smoke schedule. I have my strains. I know what I'm going to use throughout the day. And I still get it done. I still show up for my clients. I'm still professional. So I love that aspect of it. And I definitely love being the person. I work, with a lot of women and Black women, and I love having the opportunity to bring more Black women into the industry and understand all of the ways that you can function in this space, especially when you talk about the history of cannabis and how it has unfortunately impacted Black and Brown communities. So to be in a space that has been so very much against us and in some ways still is, and to find success there and help others find success, I'd say that's definitely what drives me.
Yeah. Yeah. So now tell us a little bit. Let's kind of shift over to the logistical side and tell us a little bit about the beginnings of building this business and some of the practical things you did to start to bring this business online.
Mhm. You know what? I started with what I had. And I'll say that I think most people, when they're looking to make a transition, and a transition as big as getting into cannabis, or just changing their career altogether, is I think they have to scrap everything and start anew.
Mm,
And that was definitely a learning curve, or a mental block that I had to get over. Because, like I said, initially I thought I had to get a dispensary, I had to be in the licensed area. But I just started looking at the businesses that already existed, and I started finding holes and gaps in their content and their storytelling. I started noticing that it was very much, here's some weed and it's legal, come get it, you want it, we got it. And I started noticing all of the ways that a lot of brands were just missing the mark in terms of communication and engagement, and cultivating like true audiences who were really tied into the brand story. I wasn't
yeah.
hearing a lot of that. And I just, I took my skills that I had and was like, hey, this is how I can help you. And I started with what I had, and I just cultivated my own skill to fit into the cannabis space.
And so did it start more as a consulting thing, or what were some of the ways that you wanted to kind of turn this into a service or product early on? And then how has that evolved over the course of your business?
Mhm. My initial approach in the door was copywriting. And so what I would do is when I went to those conferences, I made sure that I was having conversations with those panelists. A lot of them had licenses or had just started like agencies. And I was like, hey, do you need a copywriter? Because this is what I do. And I understand the plant. I was able to demonstrate how much I understood the plant and regulations with copy, and what you could do in the digital space, what you can do in print advertising. I educated myself on regulations, and just married the two together. And I just started pitching myself. Like I just slid in people's inboxes and was like, hey, here's my body of work. This is a little bit about my story. I want to get into this space. And I'd like to offer you this service or do this for you, see how you like it. And that's, just kind of built it like that.
Awesome. And you mentioned the some of the regulations and stuff like that. I'd imagine that there are some kind of delicate ways you've got to handle the language about how it's communicated. Were there other things like that that kind of became obstacles or hurdles that you had to overcome, or other resistance that you experienced as you started working this business?
You know what? I'm going to say that I feel very fortunate that I didn't feel like I felt any resistance. I thought, from my family's perspective, I was terrified to tell my mom. I was like, oh no, what am I going to tell her? And they were just, everyone was cool with it. I think it was the timing. Timing has a lot to do with everything. I also think that I did my due diligence. Like I just didn't hop
Hmm.
into it. And I also had a foundation of a business that already existed and a skill set that is really transferable to any industry. Um, and I just, yeah, I think I was all started becoming more honest and open with myself and family members. So it just made sense, I think. Yeah. So I was fortunate in that way.
Very cool.
Mhm.
What were some of the things that you've experienced in your business that you would call big wins, or just like really important moments that maybe um, were inflection points where you experienced more growth um, or more success?
Yeah, I'll say the beginning. So when I shifted, I kind of made this whole announcement like, hey, I'm moving into the cannabis space. I'll say that that was monumentous for me because I was really like being a true Gemini. I was being completely duplicitous. I was running a front end of a business that was all about digital content, but on the back end, I was consulting on license applications and talking about cannabis. And I just wanted to keep that very much a secret. When I decided to be public with it, I think that was a huge one for me. Also, um, with COVID-19, something happened within the industry that made us essential. Um, Believe it or not, my business, like I haven't had a break honestly since March. There's something about the pandemic that made people be like, oh, well, maybe we should, try cannabis. And I think, at the end of 2019, it was a rough year for cannabis. Last year just wasn't the best. It was rough. And so to come around as an industry and get this essential status in the middle of this pandemic was just huge. So I'll say that like in the last couple of months, the business has just skyrocketed. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a common theme I've seen with talking with other creators that it's really interesting to see under the circumstances how some businesses are actually thriving and doing really well. Um, and I'm sure that with the cannabis business, there are a couple of different layers to that. Um, but that's really interesting. And so since March, you've seen a lot of growth. And has that affected kind of your outlook for this year or for the future of your business in any way?
Very much so. I will say that I am absolutely taking advantage of the momentum. And this is probably, I will say this is my biggest win in the last year. I just hosted a digital conference, a 2-day digital conference specifically for ancillary cannabis entrepreneurs. And I think I decided to to announce it about 2 weeks before I decided to do it. But I had almost 300 people attending.
Wow.
I had 10 amazing speakers. So there's just, and to have this conversation with you is a testament to how consistently working and shifting the thoughts and conversations around cannabis is really in a sense working because there's not a lot of platforms that are we're still taboo, so people don't know how to handle us and have conversations because again it's that gray area. So
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your business as it exists today, and what are on the on the Podia platform or even outside of that. How do you productize your business, or what services do you offer?
So I offer some digital products for people who just maybe are just trying to figure it out, that starting point. And mostly those products are about content delivery. So if you have a cannabis brand of any sort, ancillary, just showing up and figuring out how to ease into those conversations and not get blocked on social media, how to really communicate with an email list and things like that. And then the next step is I have something called the content cure, where we go through a 90-day process and literally find you a cure for your content. We strategize, we talk about your goals and your audience and create those content workflows. And then for most of my licensed clients and retainer clients, we just work on a strategy basis. So I'm taking care of all of their content, the strategy across platforms. My team and I are doing the actual copy and content development, the strategies, the digital strategies for growth and visibility. So those are typically the three ways I'm working to build more content in the library on Podia, of course. I am going to be doing more like master classes, webinars. I'm changing the name, working on the name. So just
Mm-hmm.
creating more learning experiences and online, building online community that I think that is not as not as visible in the cannabis space, and
Yeah.
finding, especially trying to find that digital space where we could be and run our businesses legally without being shut down.
Right. Tell me a little bit. You mentioned your team. Um, had you already put together your team before you started focusing on cannabis, or is that a more recent development?
That's more recent. I knew that I needed the support. In business, I think as the leader of a business, you of course start the business with your talent, what you're great at, and eventually, and for me, that's strategy and my thoughts, kind of how I think. Of course, my written content, but I don't always have the time to do that, so it needs to be relayed more. So what I did was I started like an intern program, and then worked up into bringing on like some contract or part-time support. So just as the business has grown, I've been intentional about making sure that I'm supported and also supporting other people um, to have some gig work or contract work as well.
Yeah. So I've got a couple more questions for you, and these are kind of bigger zoom out kind of questions, but I want to know just and you've already kind of said this in a few different ways throughout this conversation, but what is uh what do you hope for the world as your business continues its work, as you continue your work? What are you hoping to see um the impacts of that in the world for your business?
I really want more people to see that cannabis is not bad, that it is in fact good. I want people to understand that you can consume and um, still have a spiritual connection or still have faith. There's this whole thing between cannabis and faith. That's a whole different conversation, that you could consume and be professional. And I want people to understand all of the benefits of cannabis and really kind of understand why they took it from us in the first place, why they didn't want us to have it. And I would love to be that person that you think of when you think about cannabis. Like when you think about cannabis, I really want you to think R'Chelle Lynn. Hey, she talks a lot about this, and um, she's someone who's shown me all of the different ways that I could be involved and also build a foundational business in the space of cannabis.
Yeah, so what your hope kind of extends even beyond just helping business owners, although that is a huge part of it. But you're hoping that that people just in general are able to kind of evolve in their understanding, and that um, you are kind of a person who gets to help them make that evolution.
Hmm. For
Very
sure.
cool. And then thinking about your business, 5 years, 10 years from now, what do you envision for the future of your business, or how do you think things are going to change or evolve in the coming years?
Oh wow. I definitely want to be the one of the go-to agencies for Black cannabineurs. I definitely want them to come for like the full service through the agency. I want to have done my TED Talk by then. And I really just want to be making an impact in my community, um, in terms of empowering other people with the tools to start their own businesses, not just these little pop-up businesses. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
Hmm.
actual businesses that are going to create generational wealth and legacy.
Very cool. Um, is there before we close out, is there anything else that you'd like to share as an encouragement for um, other people who are thinking about starting a business online, kind of going through a similar journey where you've taken some skills that you had um, and you translated those to selling products and services online?
Yeah, I would say definitely take your time. I think right now a lot of people just rush. They rush into everything. Even if you currently have a business, 9 times out of 10, you might be rushing through your content because you probably have an idea and you're like, oh, I just want to get it all out there. Take your time, and study the craft, study the industry. I will say that a lot of the ways and reasons why I got ahead, in a head start in a sense, is because I really understood the language. I understood as much as I could the science of the plant. I invested. I invested and went to different conferences. And outside of that, also just work with what you have. I think so many of us are looking outside of ourselves for more. And if you just take a moment to look internally, you'll see all of the things, like, and it may even be things about you that you don't like or that you think are weaknesses, that are in fact strengths and can really propel you to the next step. And then outside of that, for me, mindset is everything. Like, there are people who
Hmm.
are like, girl, you're just positive all the time, because I have to be. Um, I get upset, but I shift that. So if you can train your mind, like, I'm in LA and I work East Coast hours, that is a level of discipline for me. So if you could find those things that, that thing where you can have an area of discipline and you can train your mindset and remain positive and don't give up, I think those are the keys to success.
That is wonderful advice. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. If people want to learn more about your business, or even just kind of look to you as an example and look at your work, where can they find you online?
So you can find me at R'Chelle Lynn on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And my name is spelled a little funny, so it's RCHELLELYNN. And then you can also visit R'ChelleLynn.com. And that's where you can find out about me.
All right. Well, R'Chelle Lynn, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your story. And I've learned a ton, and I hope that our fellow creators who are watching this have also learned a lot. And I'm excited to hear more in the coming years how your business does. I'm definitely wanting to keep a pulse on it. I'm very interested in your work, and appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today.
Thank you so much.